Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. This is Football at 4.
Josh Henning and Danny Ryan filling in for Mike Gill on our Wednesday edition of the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. We're counting down the days to Christmas, which is also the same day as the Eagles' next game. Can they rebound from this 3-game losing streak? Did you know that the Eagles have had 7 3-game losing streaks since 2012, and since 2012, they are 5-2 after those 3-game losing streaks? Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast, InsideTheBirds.com, joining us here on a Wednesday edition of the Sports Bash. Jeff, how you doing today?
I'm great, fellas. How you guys doing?
Doing pretty good. So, yes, the Eagles have lost 3 straight games, but how much confidence does Geoff Mosher have in their ability to figure this out? Because Nick Sirianni gave us a lot of platitudes today, a lot of placating, but not a lot of real answers per usual.
Yeah. Look, I mean, you talked about their 3-game losing streaks in the past and how they've been able to rebound. And I would love to go back and look at who they were playing, right, in those scenarios, because obviously in this case, it shapes up well for the Eagles to figure things out just based on the strength of the schedule alone. 2 games against the Giants, a game against the Cardinals. I mean, you're talking about 2 of the worst teams in the NFL. Now, both of them are feisty. They'll play hard. And I think part of the measuring stick we'll have for the Eagles over the next 3 weeks is not like, do you win, but do you win convincingly and commandingly? What matters first right now is that they get a win. But I don't think anybody will feel like all their problems are solved if they go out there and beat the Giants 10-3 at the same time. So do I have confidence that they can win these next 3 games? Yes. Do I have confidence that they can do a better job offensively, defensively, coaching? Yes. Do I have confidence that the Eagles by round 2 and maybe the conference championships will be so much better that we can talk about them being in the same company as the 49ers? I do not. And that's mainly from how I feel about A, the personnel that they have, especially on defense, and B, what's going on, the way the organization has handled some of their adversity lately.
When you say handled their adversity, can you expound on that? Because I think that a lot of people out there, they keep, like, we've had people text into the show today saying what I was saying last week, but I'm sure you guys have talked about as well on and off the Inside the Birds pod, which is the idea of the definition of insanity is doing the same thing again and again and expecting a different result. So are they going to keep being insane, or are they actually going to do something about this adversity?
Can I redefine insanity a little bit to apply to the Eagles for
Sure.
Not doing the same thing over and over, but doing something so unconventional and weird that it makes no sense? It seems insane to me not to demote your defensive coordinator. I think that's happened already this year in Buffalo and other places. If you're not happy, we've seen good teams fire their offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator. We've seen good teams change play callers. What we don't ordinarily see is you keep that person on your staff and promote his underling above him while still calling it his defense. Even today, Nick Sirianni told the press that Matt Patricia, of course, cannot just run his defense here in Philadelphia after they've been doing the Sean Desai defense for 13, 14 weeks. So they're going to have Matt Patricia here running Sean Desai's defense, which they just have told you that they don't think is doing a good job by demoting Sean Desai. Why can't they just be normal? And listen, I am not saying this because I don't advocate firing and hiring. I think that's terrible to have to comment on people getting hired and fired. But I honestly thought it was emasculating and neutering of what they did to Sean Desai that I'm actually sympathetic for him. I think firing him would be the normal thing to do and allow him to move on and not sit there on national TV and be talked about as the guy who just lost his job and has to stay on the staff and help the guy who just took his job. That's weird. And that's one of those things that the Eagles do every once in a while in response to adversity that always makes the fan base and the media say, what are you doing? You're a good, healthy organization for the most part. Who does this? Nobody does this, right? So again, the Eagles do things unconventionally. Sometimes it works out for them very well, and we all look back on it and say, well, that was unconventional, but it worked. Maybe the process that led to drafting Jalen Hurts is an example, right? There are other times they do things unconventional, and you say, what were you thinking? Like the time you tried to put 3 offensive coaches in Doug Peterson's staff that he didn't want, and then your offense stunk that year, and you wonder why. So that's unconventional. How the players, some of them, are handling it with social media, sparring with former players, sparring with fans. That's not a good vibe either. That's not good response to adversity. So, I'm looking to see how this team responds. But in the past, we've seen that they have really struggled at times when adversity sets in to be a patient organization and believe in their core principles.
Hey, Geoff, speaking of this team responding, a certain player on the defense and, whatever you want to call it, Sean Desai's, Matt Patricia's defense needs to respond after poor play, especially over the past few weeks. And I brought him up earlier in the show, but that's James Bradberry. I was scrolling through the media this week. I saw something where he was literally involved in every single catch during the 92-yard drive against the Seahawks that won them the game. In his past 2 games in coverage, he's got 15 targets, in which 13 of them were brought in for receptions, 9 first downs, 175 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Now, I'm not in the camp that's saying, you have to start Keely Ringo or a Josh Jobe, get them more reps over James Bradberry. A lot of fans are, though. Where do you stand on that? And do you think that those fans are overreacting to say, hey, we need to see Bradberry much less on that field?
And, I can't blame the fans for, when the organization itself strips a guy of his title for not doing a good enough job. I can't blame fans for saying that James Bradberry should be benched either, because he's, for quite a while, hasn't done a good enough job, and it's getting worse, as you just pointed out, Danny. I mean, he's really the Eagles didn't get much of a pass rush on that touchdown, but I don't think it would have mattered, because as soon as Drew Lock saw one-on-one coverage with Jackson Smith-Njigba against James Bradberry, he was throwing that ball, which has been kind of a problem why the Eagles aren't getting great pass rush lately, despite having really good pass rushers, is because the quarterbacks see the matchup they want and they throw the ball. So I can't blame anybody for reacting that way, but I would caution and say, okay, you want Bradberry out because he's not playing well. So now you want to go forward in games that you're still trying to win. You lost control of the number 1 seed of the conference. You got a tied record for Dallas. You're ahead, but you can't afford slippage and to lose while Dallas wins right now. You want to go ahead and play Keely Ringo and Eli Ricks, at both corner spots and rely on all that inexperience. You might get away with it, but you also might not. And, it could become a be careful what you ask for proposition.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, Danny, I have a tough time seeing this organization sort of admitting that after signing him to an extension this offseason, that they're now going to bench him and make his future very uncertain, even though we know after this year, it's probably going to be uncertain anyway.
Yeah. I mean, truth be told, they're fighting now for the 2 seed. If they win out and the Lions also win out, they're not even going to get the 2 seed at this point. The Lions would beat them in the tiebreaker, having the 5-1 record against common opponents. So if you put a guy like Keely Ringo in there, an inexperienced guy has been playing, let's say, better than James Bradberry, but you put him in there and he doesn't shine on the big stage against lesser competition, you could have a much less chance of getting that 2 seed.
But really quick, I just want to throw this out there to you, Geoff, because, you guys talk with Greg Cosell every week. You talk with guys like Jason Avant and Clay Harbor every week on the Inside the Birds podcast and the Inside the Birds YouTube channel. You got the Patreon with Inside the Birds. You talk to a lot of smart people every week. I don't understand, and maybe you have a better answer, why they're not using Bradberry properly. I think part of the problem is that Bradberry is a zone corner, and they're asking him to play man defense. To me, it's not rocket science. Stop asking a guy to do something he's not good at.
Yeah, so there's a lot in that. You're right. I would say that
Thanks.
There's no you're right in theory.
Gotcha.
In application, right, that's difficult because there is no defense that I know of outside of like maybe the Legion of Boom Seahawks that just plays zone, right? Like you have to play man concepts at certain times, and you especially need to play man concepts on third down if you want to pressure quarterbacks with more than 4, and they've felt like they needed to do that quite a bit this year not only because the front 4 wasn't getting home, but the reaction to what they did last year has caused teams to want to keep in a tight end, keep in a running back. You always have to counter punch when the other team punches back to you. You can't just put this guy in nothing but zone and say that's his best position. Last year, Josh, to your point, he had such a good year. Even in, by the way, there are man concepts within zone as well. If you're playing cover 3 zone and they're sending a go route up your side, right? You have to cover that guy. And the 49ers last year, the Giants even said it. They felt they could get Bradbury in one-on-one situations, whether the Eagles were in man or were in zone. And the only reason they couldn't and didn't was because their quarterbacks didn't have time to block it up. Well, now you're seeing it differently. Now they're playing a tougher schedule. They're playing quarterbacks who many of them seeing the Eagles 2 years in a row or a second time. Or just like the other night with Drew Lock, they see the one-on-one matchup, they go for it. So, I mean, remember that started off, those 2 catches, that the one that Metcalf made and the one that Smith and Jigba made, started off as what looked like zone because there were 2 deep safeties. At the last minute, one safety comes down and it changes to cover one man. So you've got to be able to have versatility and multiplicity in this league to survive on the outside and to really build a defense. If this were a Tampa 2 team, I would agree with you, Josh. I mean, play a Tampa 2 style defense and let them play zone off corner all day long, but that's not how they're built.
By the way, a quick nugget, not that putting them in new threads is going to get this team back on track, but it might be a nice little change. The team announced they're going to be wearing all black on Christmas Day for the first time this season. So, hey, anything to get the juices flowing, I guess, for this
team.
Well,
they were undefeated wearing the Kelly green, so maybe the idea is stop wearing the regular uniform.
I think that they should wear a special red and green uniform for Christmas on Christmas.
Is the vanilla uniform combo turning this offense vanilla? No, I'm just kidding.
No, but seriously, Geoff, like they got to do something different, and maybe just psychologically wearing a different uniform is part of that. I mean,
what did Coach Prime always say? Look good, play good, right?
Yeah, look good, play good, play good, get paid good.
That's right. That's right.
Well, speaking of getting paid, you guys mentioned Bradbury is getting paid a lot of money right now because of that contract extension, and to me, I think part of the conversation also has to be about the other side of the field. No Darius Slay till further notice. I mean, they're not putting him on the injured reserve, right, Geoff? So, I mean, I'm assuming Slay is going to be back in a couple of weeks, but we don't know the extent of that knee procedure that he had. I mean, we haven't heard Slay talk himself yet about it. So from your perspective, what is a reasonable expectation for Slay to return?
Yeah, clean out surgeries, arthroscopic knee surgeries, usually to remove some loose bodies or tighten some things up there. They're not major surgeries. I think I thought it was Todd Herremans who once had his done before a bye week and was literally able to play after. So it was almost like he was only out for 2 weeks.
Right.
So that's not, I wouldn't call that normal, but that was just one example.
Yeah,
it just shows you that and you can come back pretty quickly from a knee surgery.
I would say that was from the podcast. It was Todd and Trey and who else on the pod that you guys have to have on the Inside the Birds podcast platform. He told that story on one of the episodes. I forget which one, but I remember him telling the story about that.
Yeah, I want to say it was 06 or 07 season. So I mean, I would think if we'll have to see. I don't want to speculate, but I would think at very least he can come back for the playoffs. If there's a game, if they need to win that Giants game at the end of the year for whatever reason, maybe, and he's good enough to go, well, then maybe he plays. But I would think that they would feel like right now, let's just have him healthy for the playoffs.
The other injury this week we got to talk about is Landon Dickerson, random thumb surgery that nobody knew about until earlier today. He's been ruled out basically for Monday's game. So, I mean, I'm a little confused, Geoff, because I've heard stories of guys playing with injuries and surgeries and just putting that big club on their hand. They're good to go. So, I mean, is this just an extra precautionary thing, or is there maybe more to it with Dickerson?
Well, you want Dickerson to be at full strength. Again, you want him full strength for the playoffs. A guard is a position. You're right. You have seen guys play. I feel like it's more defense where you see guys play with their hand wrapped. Offense, it's difficult because you need those hands to punch and to grab jerseys legally, of course, and use your hand. Fire fire your hands off. And I'm not saying you can't do it. I just think that the hand usage for an offensive lineman, especially an interior offensive lineman, you're switching off, you're pivoting so much. I think maybe at an offensive tackle, maybe you can get away with it more because you can ride one guy to the edge with one arm. But I would think interior offensive line, it's difficult to play with a clubbed up hand. And again, you want him full strength. Now, the issue that you have with Cam Jurgens out is, are you going to have to start both Tyler Steen and Sua Opeta against the Giants? And why that's problematic isn't just because the Giants have Dexter Lawrence and some pretty good guys up front, but it's because of what Wink Martindale does defensively. He is a guy that puts 6 and 7 guys at the line of scrimmage to show you all sorts of blitzes that makes your protection scheme change. We have to slide to our left to account for this guy. We have to slide to our right. And what he does is not actually then blitz from a different direction. So he's excellent at breaking down your protection scheme and getting a free rusher on just a 4-man rush, because you're thinking it's coming from one way. Those guys back up and it's somebody else who comes from a different angle. We saw that a lot last year, especially in the second game. That was a little closer, I think, between the Eagles and Giants. So when you have that kind of defense to prepare for, your communication and your experience really comes into play. And Tyler Steen and Sua Opeta are not your starting guards, and one of them will be playing in a spot that they haven't played a while on the left side. So I would be a little concerned about that.
So you just mentioned about Wink Martindale. So that makes me wonder, Geoff, when you look ahead to this game, is there concern about how the offense is being called? Because there's documentation online about how, like, A.J. Brown and Quez Watkins not communicating before the play. There's questions about why Jalen Hurts didn't see Devonta Smith over the cross over the middle, right? Why on the one play did they only go to the bubble screen, and I think the receiver on the other side of the field was wide open on the play? If Wink Martindale is going to bring in, this defense that can maybe confuse two younger, inexperienced players, how concerned are we that the other players on the team are maybe not communicating?
Yeah, well, I mean, in the case of communication, yes, everybody needs to be on the same page, but really there's an extra amount of pressure on the quarterback against a scheme like this, because the quarterback has to know that there's just going to be times where a free rusher is going to come through, where the offensive line does everything right because they are sliding to where they believe the blitz is going to be, but it's not going to be there. It's going to be from a different direction, and the keys are going to be off, and there's a free ran coming through. That is basically the backbone of the Wink Martindale blitz scheme, and he blitzes as much as anybody in the league. So there are absolutely going to be times that there are going to be free rushers in Jalen Hurts' face. And that means Jalen Hurts has to know it, see it, identify it, and throw it to the guy. It means that the coaching staff is going to have to come up with a game plan that gives him hot routes or quick games, so that he doesn't have to look and try to push the ball down the field when there's two guys coming at it, right? So it is going to take everything. I know you say the Giants stink, you steamrolled them, but this is not last year, and every year is new, and the Eagles are struggling right now. So they not only need to go back to the drawing board on a few things to get themselves right, but they need to be prepared for an opponent who knows what they do very well, who has seen it, and does some things that can be very tricky for the quarterback.
Hey, Geoff, I've been keeping up with Nick Sirianni's media availability today, just keeping up with some of the quotes and the news that comes out of it. And, well, Sirianni did mention today that it's his offense and Brian Johnson is calling the plays based on his offense. Well, his offense, reportedly, is what he said in the press conference, drew up a play to try and draw a pass interference. The final play of the game, the Eagles were hoping for a pass interference on the deep shot to A.J. Brown, and said, quote, "We felt like in that situation we had an opportunity to." What's your reaction to the team with just over 12 seconds left, banking on a pass interference to try and tie that game and head to overtime?
Oh man, I really have rarely heard a coach talk about drawing up a specific play, especially in that kind of instance, just to try to draw a pass interference. Yeah. I mean, that's a subjective call. So it's one thing to do a fake cadence, right? Thinking you're going to draw somebody off sides. It's another thing to think that you have a good chance of getting a pass interference. But I think that situationally, Danny, that's flawed thinking in general, because the Eagles had 2 timeouts, if I'm not mistaken, when after Jalen Hurts gets the 20-yard run. They're approaching midfield. I think they're only about 15 to 18 yards away from Jake the Make territory with 2 timeouts and 28 seconds. I feel like you had opportunities there to run 2 plays to get 18 yards. I mean, you could have run another quarterback draw potentially. You could have run some quick game. You could have done something to get the ball into that territory that is considered normal and within the framework of your offense, as opposed to let's just throw the ball up and hope to get pass interference. So that surprises me. And if I were his boss, if I were Jeffrey Lurie, Howie Roseman, I would hope that he was just saying something to the media to avoid that old competitive advantage thing that he likes to say, and was not really factual on that. I don't know. That's a tough one to swallow right there.
By the way, this isn't just hearsay. It comes from a pretty decent source, Josh Tolentino of Philly Inquirer, Fox 29 Philadelphia Eagles reporter, and he essentially said, Nick said that he felt like in that situation they had an opportunity to try and draw a pass interference. I get it if it's, a little bit earlier in the fourth and you want to try and get into touchdown territory to really put the game away. But with the game on the line, like you said, needing 15 to 18 yards, and I get everyone in hindsight 2020 wants to look back at Kenny Gainwell wide open as Hurts is already about to fire the ball downfield. But I don't know how you can make that play call and bank on the defense messing up with the game on the line. It just puzzles me.
I know Nick Sirianni also said that Christian McCaffrey called out a play on the Manning cast that everybody has seen by now before the Eagles ran it, that the Eagles actually never ran before. And he was sort of defending the idea that his offense is predictable by the fact that he's saying Christian McCaffrey picked out a play we've never ran before and got it. And I almost think that actually shows you how predictable at times you are.
Yes, exactly.
You can run, that someone pretty much has an idea of what you're going to do just based on the formation, even if you haven't ran it exactly like that.
Or the Eagles are running a play that they stole from somebody else, and that play is recognizable enough that it still looks the same in another system. It's like, Jeff, I used the example earlier in the show about how, Bill Walsh created the West Coast offense. And just because Mike Holmgren and Andy Reid and Mike Shanahan and Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay and all these guys use variations of it doesn't mean it's literally the same, but there are still concepts that are similar from guy to guy to guy that you might recognize.
Now, did Bill Walsh create it, Josh, or was it really just stolen from Paul Brown's concepts? Now we can't have a really long conversation.
Good question. or did Bill Walsh just call it better than Paul Brown?
Maybe. But I think it goes to the point where it doesn't really matter. It just doesn't look good when somebody knows what kind of play you're going to run, whether you run it or not.
Yeah. Well, we'll be keeping tabs on this. Of course, the Inside the Birds podcast, InsideTheBirds.com, where Geoff Mosher, Adam Kaplan, and the team are covering all of this. Jeff, before I let you go, because last time we talked to you this week, Christmas coming up, favorite Christmas movie?
Oh, I mean, is there an argument on this? I mean, come on.
No, I don't know. Is there?
I go back and forth. My favorite Christmas movie, I have 2, and they're very different. One's a comedy, one's a drama. I pretty much probably gave it away there. Die Hard and Home Alone. There's no doubt about
okay.
it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right.
Which one was interesting? Which one's interesting?
Well, I mean, earlier in the show, we got Christmas Vacation. So
great one. It's a good one. I like it.
Well, you answered the question I was going to follow up with, and which would have been, is Die Hard a Christmas movie? But clearly,
how can it not be a Christmas? I'll tell you one line that makes it a Christmas movie, and it's after he kills the first guy and sends him down the elevator shaft, and the elevator opens,
right.
And Hans is reading it, and he reads it and goes ho, ho, ho. That's what makes it a Christmas movie. Hans doing the ho, ho, ho. That just ties it all together.
Well, see, my line would have been when he's crawling through the ventilation shaft and he says, this is not how I plan to spend Christmas this year. At least, he's complaining the whole time about how he's stuck in this ventilation shaft and he's having to save Christmas like he's Santa Claus or something.
Yeah. Why don't you do it? Come out here, have a holiday party. Yeah. Now the full line is, now I have a machine gun. Ho, ho. Oh.
Right.
Great stuff.
Always great to talk with Geoff Mosher at Geoff P. Mosher on the Twitter X platform. And he joined us as he always does here on Football at 4. Jeff, Merry Christmas. Enjoy it with your family, and we'll talk soon.
Appreciate it, guys. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. Talk to you soon.